Namaste and a very warm welcome to the Nationalist Madrasi. This is Intellectual Exchange with me, Sri Dharmarathan. In today's episode of the Intellectual Exchange, we are joined by Professor Abhishek Banerjee. Professor Abhishek Banerjee is encyclopedia of whatever is happening in the world, be it current affairs, be it strategic affairs, be it internal security, be it foreign policy. He is a well-known person of all these things, and he has a very vast knowledge of all these things as well. We are proud to have you, Abhishek Banerjee, sir, in our podcast as well. Thank you so much for your time, and we have a lot to discuss about the happenings in and around the world as well, and based on our Indian interest as well. So, thank you so much for accepting the invitation for our podcast, Dr. Abhishek Banerjee. Thank you so much. Sir, I want to discuss a lot about with you because you are an encyclopedia of what is happening in today's in today's world as well. So let us first discuss the world affairs, and then we will go into the inside happenings which is happening in India as well. So I would like to start with what is happening in Russia, because Russia, there is a coup against Mr. Putin, President Putin as well. So what is happening in Russia? Give us a brief, detailed explanation of. What is this Wagner group and what is it all about, sir?
So the military coup, we have all heard about it. Now at the heart of it is this group called the Wagner group. Now this may be a little difficult for people in India to understand because we have what is called a professional standing army, right? If there is a threat to India tomorrow, then we have our own army. But countries like Russia, countries even the United States, they have their own army, but when in times of war, what they have are called these defense contractors. So these are essentially like security companies, right? Like even if you go around Bangalore, you'll see lots of security companies. But a security company does what? It stands outside the somebody's garage or somebody's building and guards the thing. But in Russia or in the US, the security companies are massive. They have their own tanks, they have their own fighters. And they are trained at military level. So it's beyond what we imagine as an ordinary security company. So they have their own armored personnel carriers, they have their own tanks, and many of them are actually trained by retired officers from the military. So it's very big. And Wagner is one of the biggest groups in Russia. Now, of course, in Russia, because so when there is a war, they get a contract from the government to go fight in that war. This concept is a little alien to most of us Indians, but that's what they have got. It's kind of hard to believe, but.
Okay, what I understand is they are a private company.
Yes.
They work for Russian government. Okay.
So technically, anybody could go to the private company and just hire their soldiers and fight anywhere.
Okay.
In theory, but of course, if you are doing this within Russia, it's probably clear that just as like DRDO will only make tanks for Indian army, like that Wagner will only supply soldiers to the Russian government. So it is a for-profit company, but because it has become so much bigger than just a security company, it can operate like its own army. And that is what this guy Prigozhin, who was running this Wagner group, that's what he did. He said, why do I need to take orders from Putin? Maybe I'll just remove Putin and I'll just give orders myself.
Okay.
But it looks like Putin was able to stop that coup.
Okay.
And Prigozhin, as far as I have heard, last I have heard, he has been sort of exiled to Belarus, which is a neighboring country of Russia, which is just above the Ukraine. So one thing people may not know is that basically Belarus, it just means white. So white Russia. So there's a distinction between the white Russians and the red Russians. The red Russians are the old communist Russians, and this is the Belarusian. This is the white Russian. So Prigozhin has sort of been exiled. Of course, he said that I have just decided to go. They're trying to keep up appearances. Of course, Russia will not say it's a coup, but whatever it is, they have an uneasy arrangement. I would say, considering what kind of person Putin is, the future for Prigozhin does not look very bright at all.
Okay.
But let's see what happens.
But we came to know that Prigozhin was a very close aide of and one of the trusted aide of Putin as well. So why suddenly this kind of a coup, or that in the middle of a Russia-Ukraine war? We'll discuss that in a later. But why suddenly?
But that is what happens in any kind of dictatorship, right? I mean, you're the guy closest to you always turns against you, and he thinks, why do I need you? If I have the army and if I have so much power, I can just remove you. And now, of course, he a little more careful. He didn't blame Putin directly. He blamed the foreign minister. of Russia and said this is all his fault, this war is all his fault. But so he was keeping a little bit of a safety valve open, but I don't think Putin is going to forgive him. I mean, these are ex-KGB guys, they don't forgive people.
Okay. Okay. So, what will be the futuristic things which will happen in Russia? What is the next big thing which is going to happen in Russia?
I mean, it is essentially impossible to say. One thing that I would definitely say is certain is that Putin is going to take revenge on this Wagner guy. He's
only on the particular person or on the entire group itself?
I mean, that's how dictators are. I mean, he's probably going to liquidate Prigozhin and pretty much everyone close to him. That is the most likely. Of course, maybe if Putin tries to push too hard, we do not know what is the internal conflicts in Russia. Maybe Putin himself might lose his chair. I mean, so it's always an uneasy arrangement. But what I would say in general is that the war in Ukraine, it's time for everybody to bring an end to this war. Because what I see, frankly, is that both sides, what I would say, are sleepwalking into World War III. See, what has happened is that the war has gone off the front pages and we think it is a stalemate, that no side is making any gains. Technically, that is sort of true. But what is actually happening is that the reason there is a stalemate is because both sides are escalating the amount of power and material they are throwing into the conflict. And this is exactly how things went into the First World War. This is exactly how things happened in the Second World War. Both sides are escalating. Someday somebody is going to do something stupid and then there's going to be a Third World War. So while things are still under control, both sides should just disengage. They have gone way too far.
So you suggest that the war should come to an end, but what is the present situation which is there in Ukraine as well as in Russia, Abhishek sir?
So right now, I mean, the Russians, to the most part, they have not made that many gains since the beginning of the war. They have occupied a little bit of the eastern part of Ukraine, which was already under Russian occupation since like 2014 or so. But of course, I should be very careful in using words like occupation, because the Russians, whatever territory they have, they really do think it is theirs. And when I say this, it's like, of course, any country which occupies territory, of course, they will say this is theirs. But yes, their historical claim to that region is quite strong. These Donetsk regions, the eastern parts of Ukraine. See, Ukraine essentially, so there was this country, I think in a former podcast I told you, there was this country of Poland which used to exist in that area, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, and then it was split up. And then during the beginning of the First World War, the end of the beginning of the Second World War, all these countries, their borders have constantly shifted. Belarus, Ukraine, Poland, these three countries are at the heart of this. Belarus, Poland and Ukraine. And their borders have been changing constantly as a result of fights between Germany and Russia. Not from today, this has been happening since 1795. So the borders have been changed, written and rewritten so many times. If you take any piece of land over there, Ukraine can say this is ours, Russia can say this is ours. Both sides have claims, both sides have big historical claims. It's very hard to say what is fair and what is not fair. But what I would say is that best thing is to have a peace.
Okay. So how does the world see the Russia-Ukraine war? Because right now Putin is attending the virtual summit of the SCO as well. Since the G20 is on and we have the G20 summit in this month of September, we are expecting Putin to be in India as well. And so how does the world sees the Russia-Ukraine war or the happenings the current happenings which is happening now in both of the countries?
Yeah, so I would say it's almost impossible to say the world has one view because everybody has a different view, and to some extent everybody's point of view is legitimate. Let's start with the Russian point of view. The Russians are saying that in the year 1919, and after the end of the First World War, Lenin, he surrendered some of this territory. So Russia surrendered to Germany in 1917 and the World War ended in 1919. So at the time of 1917, Lenin surrendered a whole bunch of these territories to the Germans. But then the Germans lost the war anyway. So these territories, they went out of their control. And the Russians are saying we are just going and reclaiming that historic territory. The Ukrainians are saying that no, at the time in 1919 to 1921, the Polish and the Soviets, they fought a war. And Stalin was one of the main commanders in that war and the Polish won that war. And so they are saying, well, we defeated you in 1921, so we win that territory. So that territory is ours. So this is what the Russians and the Ukrainians. Now, what about the continent? The next player we talk about is the continental Europe. That's France, Germany. See, these countries, they are sort of caught halfway between America and Russia. Because they are also countries of Europe, right? So they have a sense of where these conflicts are. That's what I'm saying. This is a very old, ancient tribal conflict. So the French, the Germans, they have some understanding. Wars over this region for hundreds of years. So to some extent, I would say they also want the war to come to an end. They want to start, and they are also dependent on Russia for energy. So they have a rather wishy-washy position on the war. Then there comes the most important position, perhaps, which is the American position on the war. The problem is that the Americans do not understand the war at all because they have no sense, because they have no memory of this, of World War One and World War Two. I mean, the parts they fought, the way Americans see World War One and World War Two, they do not fully understand what happened on the Eastern Front between Germany and Russia. What happened between Germany and Russia is not really known to most Americans. So they do not fully understand the war. They see it as, a fight between, the way they are trying to make it out. Common people in America, they see it as a fight between a democracy and what a dictatorship. Of course, Ukraine is hardly a democracy. It's like barely, it is more democratic than Russia, no doubt. But it's very hard to say that Zelensky was running a real democracy for that matter. So they see it as a struggle like that's how common Americans see it. Now I'm making a distinction because how do the ruling classes in America see it? Oh, they see it very differently. See, the Afghan war ended soon after Biden came to power. And all the American defense contractors, they were very angry because now they were out of business. So that was the first time the establishment press in America turned against Biden because the one thing you never do in Washington is that you never end a war. Because if you end a war, all the defense contractors of the Pentagon get angry. But now they are super happy with the Biden administration again because they got a new war. So the Afghan war was like what, $50 billion a year? The Ukraine war is $90 billion a year. So the defense contractors are again happy. So there's another level. And then finally there are countries like India. Right. I think all we want is, obviously the general public in India probably does not know about the ancient conflict between Ukrainians and Russians. I think we just want things to normalize, and I think that is the most sensible position. We just want peace. We don't want any more fighting.
Okay. So, did Russia surpassed or superseded the Western order, which is there for the last decade?
See, everybody tries to step on everyone's toes. I mean, like I would say, frankly, it is very difficult to be sympathetic to any of the sides in this conflict. So, I would definitely say that our official position, India's official position of strict neutrality, is the correct position. We want to be strictly neutral. We do not want to indulge anybody's hypocrisy. We don't want to be friends with the US defense establishment. We are clearly no friends of the Russian dictator establishment. We just want peace. And we should be totally neutral. And I would actually want people from, going overboard and sort of being half sympathetic to Putin. No. Our position is the absolutely correct one. We're totally neutral. We have nothing to do with either side.
Okay. So, will there be any repercussions or retaliation from the West, or let's say the NATO plus West, or let's say any other countries against the Russia, sir?
Of course, they are trying everything. I mean, NATO is seeing this again as an opportunity for expansion, right? So I think there may be some details, but I think NATO has quickly expanded to include Sweden and Finland. Either they have already put them in or they are bringing them in. There are some little details to be worked out. But yeah, they are seeing it as a chance for expanding NATO. And of course, every conflict is a power game. At this point, to a large extent, the war is out of the hands of the Ukrainians as well. Because it's really the American defense establishment which is directing the war. And they have created all sorts of creative. You would be surprised to hear that the Pentagon is now claiming that they have $6 billion in additional funds that they did not know they had, which they had to fund the war. If your podcast goes on for a while, that's a total scam, and I'll explain how that thing is done with accounting.
Sure. We will discuss about the US in the later part.
Yeah.
I have a very brief.
So it's really funny how the scam was pulled off. Everybody knows it's a scam, but I'll explain it at the end.
So let's speak about France, sir. So we are seeing that France is burning, France is on attack. Like these kinds of news only comes on newspaper. What actually happening in France, and what is the problem which France is facing? Please explain to us.
So again, with the French, there is again a complicated history. So what happened is, again, as most things do in the modern world, this also goes back to something that happened after the Second World War. So France, as we know, was completely captured during the Second World War by the Nazis. But after the Nazis were defeated, France decided to try and take back all its old colonial possessions. So the French had many colonial possessions. The Dutch had colonial possessions. That was Indonesia, which is one of our neighbors. So these places were all grabbed by the Japanese during the Second World War. When the Dutch fell, when the French fell, their colonies were gobbled up too. And in North Africa, what happened was that the French colonies, under French direction, so a segment of the French, it was the Vichy French, they started collaborating with the Nazis. and the French government in Algeria, in Tunis, those regions, they started collaborating with the Germans. They joined the war on the side of the Germans. But in 1943, they were overthrown by the Allies, which is known as Operation Torch. That was November 1943, if I remember correctly. And but at the end of the war, the French started reclaiming their colonies in Morocco, in Algeria, in Indochine, which is also known as Vietnam. So they started trying to reoccupy those colonies, and there was a lot of resistance. And as you might expect, so between 1954 to 1962 comes what the French call the Sale Guerre, which literally means the dirty war. This was the period when France insisted that even though the whole world is decolonizing, Britain had already decolonized, India was free, many of the African colonies of Britain were also getting free. France said, no, there's no way, we'll hold on to our colonial positions. So they fought this long 8-9 year war, and it was a very dirty war, it was a very difficult war, and they tried to keep Algeria under control. That did not happen. They tried to make Algeria an official part of France. They claimed it's also part of France metropolitan, but that did not work. But what has happened is that now there is a huge population of Algerians and Moroccans who live in France. And they have never quite been assimilated. But there is, this is the kind of thing that creates a sort of clash within the society. Right? So there is this immigrant population which is staying within France's borders. And now they are disaffected, they are angry. And they have gone on an orgy of violence. And the last 6 or 7 days, the trigger was some kind of police shooting. But then they have come and burned 5,000 cars, and they have put the entire country in flames. And of course, there is a religious angle to it. There is absolutely a religious angle to it. The media will not mention the religious angle because for political correctness. But yeah, we have this situation where France is sitting on a tinderbox. It has always been sitting. Okay. Ever since that period after 1962. France has always been sitting on that tinderbox. I myself used to live in Paris for a very long time. You go into certain neighborhoods, you know how things are. So every neighborhood has its own culture, and they have their own regions, and they have established their own versions of law in those areas. So France is always sitting on one step away from a match. There's a matchstick, it will just light up.
So will there be a deadline on what time the protest will end, or the clashes which is happening there in France will come to an end, sir?
So these clashes, I think they are already getting a little bit under control after 6 nights. But the underlying fight is not going away anywhere. Okay. Because the divide between the people, the native French people and the Algerian and the Moroccan population, it's not
due to religion, or it is due to the racism which is being there, or which is followed by the French?
That's why it's impossible to isolate the causes. Of course, religious hatred makes up a huge chunk of what is going on. Yes, and there's racism too. But also there's a genuine disagreement about what thing. It's not just religious hatred. It's also a clash of how. In some ways, it is one of those clash of civilizations kind of thing. There's a very big difference between how the French see religion and how the immigrants from Algeria and Morocco. If you see the people from Algeria and Morocco, they see religion as the most integral part of public life. But France, because of historical reasons, France is an exception among European countries in this. They have a very strong anti-public religious mindset, because they are still in the French Revolution mindset. That's the 14th of July, right? So they have this very strong anti-clerical mindset, and they feel that religious meddling in public affairs or public shows of religion, they see it as really, really bad. And the Algerians, they cannot even understand. So it's like two groups of people who have two completely opposite views on everything that is supposed to happen. But on top of that, the more interesting part is that French law does not actually recognize any kind of heterogeneity. Okay. So France is France is France. So rules are the same for literally everybody. There is absolutely no room for any kind of heterogeneity. France is so strange that it does not even count how many citizens belong to which race. Because they are like, even if we count, that is also discrimination between people. So France has this 100% homogeneous. Now the problem is that you have 100% homogeneous laws in a society which is very deeply heterogeneous. And the two groups is the genuine clash of civilizations. What is happening in France is a genuine clash of civilizations and is going to go on for a very long time. And this is very important. The French government does not actually have any official figures. They don't even have official figures of how many people of what origin are there, because they say, no, everybody is equally French. If we count people, that is also discrimination. See, there is something even people in India would disagree. It's like, what is wrong with counting people? What is wrong with saying how many people of this and that are there? They're like, no. French is French. Everybody is French. Okay. We don't count. Okay. So there is this extreme homogeneity on one side. And on the other hand, the society is deeply heterogeneous, deeply divided. So.
Okay. I saw a video in Instagram where a minister from Poland says that we won't allow any illegal immigrants into our country as well. So France, before the 21st century, it has around 6% of immigrants, let's say not illegal immigrants, but in the past 23 years, it has grown up to 11 to 12%, which is nearly doubling which had in the past years as well. So what is happening in Europe? Because like the illegal immigrants or the immigrants, let's say, are causing each and every problem, be it from any other countries or be it from Africa, be it from any other countries, they are causing a problem. In Sweden, there was an open door policy and that caused a major problem in the Sweden as well. So let's speak about this immigrants or illegal immigrants problem in detail, sir. We have Poland, we have Sweden, we have France, and we have this problem everywhere. Why is this being a problem, or what is the main thing which is in the illegal immigrants who are coming to the Europe, sir?
So the basic thing you have to understand is that we often tend to mix up Europe with America. See, America is a nation of immigrants. Their entire DNA is to absorb people coming from outside and mingle them. Now, because America is so influential, people tend to, subsume Europe within the American culture, but Europe is not America. Europe is as much an ancient, state as maybe India. Almost. India is even more ancient, but Europe is also, they've been around for thousands of years, right? These cultures have been around for thousands of years. Now, tomorrow, suppose in India, we have like huge numbers of people from some completely different cultures. Suppose they come in. Right, it's very difficult for us to sort of absorb them immediately into our country. Right, it is the Americas, but that is America. Not every country is America. So we have to make a distinction between old world countries and new world countries. So America, Canada, Australia, these are new world countries, so to say. Of course, the word when I say new world, it is very, very loaded, because these were not empty regions, right? The native population was removed. They were just, there was a genocide of the native. That's why these countries sort of became empty, and then there was a new population. But bottom line is, ultimately what is happening is that the original inhabitants of America and Canada and Australia have disappeared. It's just a transplanted population. But Europe and India, the original populations, we are still here. Right, our ancestors were here 3,000 years ago. When Alexander came to India 2,200 years ago, right, he met the Maurya emperors. The Mauryas are still here. So if Alexander were to come back, he would be like, oh, I know the Mauryas. I fought them 2,200 years ago. Oh, that's right, we are still here. So when you have a country like Poland or you have a country like France, they have been around for thousands of years. It is very difficult for them to absorb an outside population and a completely alien culture within their borders. And and it's very hard to explain to the Americans, because Americans are like, but people come into America all the time. Yeah, that's what America is. But America is not Europe. Europe is much more like India. We will not be able to absorb, if tomorrow a whole bunch of Swedish people came into India, right, and they all settled in India, that would be very hard for us to absorb. And on top of that, the people coming in, they are very, very religiously fundamentalist. They are very strong about their culture, and it's a very difficult situation that Europe is entering.
Okay, so will there be any nearby solution in the upcoming years, or will this problem go on?
I think the problem is
sorry to interrupt here, because France is facing this kind of heat today because of the immigrants. We have to accept that.
Absolutely.
But will there be any nearby solution in the upcoming years, or let's say what is going to happen to Europe because of this illegal immigrants problem?
So I actually think the situation is going to get worse, because situations get worse when there is total communication failure on all sides. Like I said, the Algerians were coming into France, the Arabs were coming into France. They don't understand French culture at all, and the French don't understand their culture at all. On top of that, there is the sort of, because America is so powerful, American consciousness sort of dominates the world. So the Americans, they can't even understand what the people in Europe are objecting to. So their go-to claim is that, oh, you're just racist. And so it's this cauldron where nobody understands anybody else. Nobody is seeing the other person's point of view. And in many ways, nobody is capable of understanding the other person's point of view. And under these kinds of situations, conflicts tend to get worse. And the anger is mounting. If you see the police officer who actually shot that Algerian boy, his family has received €1 million in donations.
Fundraisers.
These are ordinary people. See, you can shut them up. Was it right to shoot the boy? I don't think so. I mean, the guy, as far as I heard, he was driving without a license. Is there any reason to shoot somebody who doesn't have a driver's license? Of course not. But there is a sort of anger which is there under the surface, and common people are feeling this anger. And just the American way, sort of, is to just shut everyone up. I don't think it's going to work. These conflicts are going to get worse. And Eastern Europe, even in Western Europe, the people are more subdued. In Eastern Europe, these attitudes are going to get even more pronounced. Because as I said, not only is Eastern Europe an old civilization, perhaps even some ways even more older and more, agricultural than Western Europe. And on top of that, one thing one should mention is that after the Second World War, Eastern Europe became even more segregated by groups. This is what Stalin did after the Second World War. He divided. So I told you about these countries, right? Ukraine, Poland, these were multinational sort of societies. But what Stalin did was he literally took people and isolated each group. So he said the German-speaking people will move to East Germany, the Polish-speaking people will stay in Poland, the Ukrainian-speaking people, he took them out of Poland, moved them into Ukraine. So they created these extremely homogeneous societies. These are like hyper-homogeneous societies, Poland, Ukraine, Belarus. They can't even imagine an outside civil. So it's a genuine clash of civilizations.
Okay. Let's talk about Pakistan, then China, India as well, then we'll go to US. That's a bigger part as well. So Pakistan, what is happening in Pakistan? There has been an IMF bailout to Pakistan as well, and the country's reserve is going out like anything as well. Even our Foreign Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar commented on that in a very sarcastic manner as well. So what's happening in Pakistan, and will there be any sort of nearby solutions for Pakistan? And recently, we have seen that Imran Khan has been arrested as well. So, what is the internal happenings as well as, and what is the financial happenings in Pakistan as well, Abhishek sir?
Yeah, so Dharma, I'll tell you, this might surprise your viewers because I've spent so much time talking about Algeria, Ukraine, Poland. I'll tell you one thing very honestly. One country I don't keep tabs on is Pakistan.
Okay.
Because Pakistan is a joke. It's an artificial country. It has no real existence. That's what they say. No? If tomorrow Egyptians will always be Egyptians. Ukrainians will always be Ukrainians. Who are the Pakistanis? I don't even know what Pakistan is. So it is a disaster. It is always unfolding. They'll just get worse and worse. But yeah, they will just keep surviving like this. It's just going to be a collapsed country forever and ever and ever. So it's going to get worse. And one thing I would say is a lot of people say that, an unstable Pakistan is against our interest. No. Our army is on our border. We are perfectly fine. Let them go to hell. They wanted this. We didn't ask them to go. They wanted to go. So let them just get worse and worse, and they will keep getting worse and worse. They're doing if you go back to one of Modi's speeches, I think this is before 2014. He said, "Pakistan apni maut marega." So this part I actually disagree with the word maut because I think Pakistan will survive. This is the one thing they do well. They survive, but maut is proverbial in the sense that they'll just do terribly, worse and worse. They'll become like Somalia, and frankly they deserve. I see no reason to not
more than that. Not more than that. I comment on Pakistan.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about China and India as well. So we have seen the recent Tabang clashes, and we have seen Galwan 2.5 years before,
Yes.
and before that Doklam standoff as well. So what's happening and what will be? We have been multiple groups, be BRICS, SCO, G20, and Russia, China, and India as well. So there are multiple groups between India and China as well, but there is no cooperation between these two countries. So what is your take on that, and what will be our futuristic or bilateral relations with the Chinese, sir?
Yeah, so China is beyond doubt our biggest challenge on the foreign policy front, and this is something I believe that the conflict between India and China, it is slowly going to define the world for the next 100 years, because this is going to be the dividing line. our relations with China are just getting bad towards these things like breaks, SEO. I mean, these are talk shops. There's nothing much that is going to come. At the moment, I believe India's strategy, the best strategy for India, is to just play for time. Because you see, the problem is that China is much ahead of us in many ways. So China is the second largest economy, we are the fifth largest economy. What we have to do exactly in some ways what the Chinese did. The Chinese said, Deng Xiao, I think it's Deng, I might be wrong. He said, that hide your strengths, just stay calm for a while and play for time. And when the time comes, you reveal your strength. So at the moment, one of the fundamental rules in diplomacy is that, and S. Jaishankar sort of said such a thing like this. You might remember, he made a comment like this and he got a lot of heat for it. But the reality is that the rule in diplomacy is that you never fight when you don't have the cards. Right now, we don't have the cards. So that's okay. Things change all the time. So the thing right now for India is to stop, play for time and negotiate like crazy. This is exactly what China did with the US. Right? China was always going to be America's enemy. But you see how they opened up to Nixon, how they managed their foreign policy. They just bargained, talk. So the thing to do with China right now is that we just keep negotiating or sort of pretending to negotiate, and we just keep talking and sort of wasting time. Because we are at number 5, we have to first reach number 3. Number 3 is expected somewhere around the year 2027. So that's not really that far away, just 3-4 more years. In 3-4 more years, we'll be at number 3. We'll get much closer to China by the year 2030, 2033. So around 10 years from now, then we'll see what is happening. But for the next 10 years, and China knows this too. The Chinese are not stupid. They have read world history. They have taken every lesson out of world history. So China knows that the next 10 years are the most crucial years between India and China. If in these 10 years, China is able to crush India's ability to stand up to them, then China wins almost for the next 100 years. And so these next 10 years are most crucial to us. We have every day that goes by. Remember, when you have a standoff does not mean 50-50. A standoff is actually, for each day a standoff goes by and the stronger side has not won, that means it has lost.
Okay. You're mentioning India or China?
So who is stronger?
Okay.
China is stronger, right?
Okay.
So each day that passes and China does not win something, that means they have lost that.
Okay.
This is how people think in terms of diplomacy, right?
Okay. Yeah, exactly.
That every day that passes and China has not won something, that means they have lost. Why? Because China is the stronger party. So now, if we keep playing for time and if 10 years go by, then that crucial window closes. 10 years from now, we will no longer be vulnerable to the Chinese. Okay. And if the Chinese miss this, if they screw this up, if they can't get the better of India in the next 10 years, they are in a world of trouble. Because 10 years from now, India is Teflon coated. At that point, nobody can touch us. Okay. If we are the strong world's third largest economy, nobody can touch us. So we just have to make sure that this delicate phase of 10 years, we get peace, we get a chance to develop our economy, to bring ourselves into every value system. For instance, things like semiconductors, and focus on China's vulnerabilities. Even though China seems very strong, China has one big vulnerability, which is semiconductors. They almost have to import 80% of their semiconductors. If we get into semiconductor manufacturing, without semiconductors from the hair dryer to the car, nothing will work. So if we can get into things like that, and we can play on China's vulnerabilities. And so one thing I did was, earlier in the podcast, I said a lot of negative things about the US military-industrial complex. But this is what diplomacy is. There is no sense of morality. A warmongering America, an angry America is good for us right now. Because as long as America is building up its military industry, China is nervous. Okay. And if China is nervous and disengaged and unable to focus on India, that gives us time. So one thing I want to repeatedly mention is that when talking about world affairs, there is no good, there is no bad. We are only in it for our interest, and everybody else is also in it for our interest. There is no friend, there is no enemy, nothing. These are not people. These are not classmates that you wish me well, I wish you well. No. Nobody wishes anybody well. Everybody is friend, everybody is enemy. There is only interest. So next 10 years we need peace, and that we have to make sure. And if we get 10 years of peace, China is in big trouble.
Okay, so what is the best position on India as well as in China as well? Because like they need one liable or trusted partner, that is India. So I mean, in my point of view, I'm saying that is
And talk
India.
about the US or China?
No, you the West. I'm talking about the West in particular.
Yeah.
So they are seeing. Are they seeing India as a replacement for China in the Asian level?
Obviously, so their obvious go-to plan is that India should become, what China in place of China. There should be some big power, right, in Asia. And obviously, there's only one country that they can they see some truck with, which is India. But then our challenge is to take the advantages from the West, advantages of that collaboration. For instance, the Americans they are giving us high-grade technology which they wouldn't have allowed anybody else. Right now, the deal that has just been struck in Washington with Biden, they are giving us this, engine technology which they wouldn't share with anybody else, not even with NATO partners. But they are ready to give us. But what do they want in return? Of course, they want something in return. It's totally fair. They want India to become part of the American system.
Okay.
But what is our challenge? We have to make sure that we get all the advantages without becoming part of the American system. And this is an extremely hard job. This is a day by day, minute by minute negotiation. So again, if we show the Americans that we are angry, then the Chinese will take advantage of that. So we are stuck in a very delicate, very difficult situation. The next 10 years are crucial. Because again, we have to maintain our strategic autonomy as well. If in the process of stopping China, we become a NATO ally, and we become like Australia or England, or we become a satellite of the US, then what was the point anyway? We have to make sure that we rise as a true superpower. And for that, the next 10 years are absolutely crucial. And America is desperate too, because America wants to tame. So, just as I said, in the next 10 years, China wants to tame India, and America also wants to tame India. Because they know that sooner or later, India will be a very powerful country, will be a superpower. So right now, they want to make sure that this is a superpower that listens to us. We have to make sure that also does not happen. So too many levers, all of them moving.
Some of the diplomats or let's say ex-diplomats or many foreign political commentators keep commenting that India is closely moving towards Washington rather than Moscow. Do you agree on that?
We have definitely had to move somewhat towards Washington instead of Moscow, because the other thing that we have to prevent is that Russia is moving closer to China. See, if you look at the world, it's very simple. The US and Canada, right? Canada is like essentially under the US control, right? So the Chinese, when they see Russia, they want to a very similar arrangement, right? They want Russia to be just under Chinese control, the way Canada is essentially under American control. And Canada and Russia are actually very similar countries. They are massive countries. They have small populations. They are very high resource range. Canada and Russia are actually very, very similar. So that's what China wants from Russia. Now, but Russian people are not like Canadians. Russians also want to maintain, so forget India's strategic autonomy. Russia also needs to maintain its strategic autonomy. Putin does not want to become Xi Jinping's deputy, right? So Russia needs us also. And the one country that can help Russia not become China's deputy is India. So we have to understand the leverage we have also. So we have to make use of every single thing. So there are lots of moving levers.
Okay, so that's a very good comment. Sir, let's now move into the India-US relationship. Sorry, before going to that, I want to speak about the Canada thing, which as you mentioned as well. So recently there was an article and there was some news headlines as well that India is interfering in the internal matters of Canada as well. And we have seen a video that Z has been openly cursing Justin Trudeau in a meeting as well. So what's happening, and is Canada going under the control of China, or what is happening in Canada? Is really India intervening in the internal matters of Canada as well? And let's talk about the Khalistan issue as well, because like a part of, they need the support to form the government in Canada. They need the support of the Sikhs, the Khalistan groups which is present over there. So let's talk about that also.
Yeah, why would India interfere in the internal affairs of Canada? This is a completely mind-numbingly foolish statement that, of course, the Canadians are giving because they have a weak law enforcement. They are not able to control these subversive Khalistani elements in their country. Of course, as you say that, is Canada slowly going under the control of China? Yes and no. See, the Chinese, as I said, the Chinese are very clever. they understand that they cannot militarily fight the United States. They know that. It's not possible. So what they have understood is, and this comes from their old understanding of communism, because even though China is a highly capitalist country today, their leaders have all been indoctrinated in the practices of communism. And communists, one thing they understand very well is subversion. So China knows they cannot fight the US militarily, but that's okay. They don't need to fight the US militarily. Instead, what the Chinese are doing is they are buying up the ruling classes in America.
Okay.
They are going to these big businesses in America. And Canada is a much smaller economy, it's a much weaker country compared to the US, so it is much more vulnerable to subversion than the US ever could. So that's exactly what the Chinese are doing. They are going up to the big Canadian businesses and, so they're going after their business interests in China. They're saying, you do this for me, then I'll do this for you. And slowly, the ruling elites in the US and Canada are being compromised by the Chinese. And this is a very big danger. It's actually happening and it's happening in almost like everyday ways, even in London. British people living in London find it very hard to afford a house right now. You know why? The fundamental reason for that is that Chinese billionaires have bought up so much property all across London. This is happening in New York too. There are actually many cities across the US which are now actively considering laws preventing Chinese citizens from buying property. I believe Florida has already passed a law like that to stop this. They are buying up farmland, they are buying up homes. So they know they cannot fight militarily, right? So they have figured out how to infiltrate. And this is what they are doing with money, which is just as good as weapons. It is, in some ways, much better than weapons. You cannot even talk back. I mean, you cannot bomb somebody for buying a house. So it's becoming a bigger and bigger challenge. And Canada, of course, and India has become the whipping boy everywhere. You see, there are many reasons for it. Reason number one is nobody. A lot of people would say racism. I agree, it's because of racism, but I'll put racism as reason number two. Why? Because reason number one is the most fundamental reason. Nobody likes somebody to stand up. It is just a fundamental thing. Why would they are sitting comfortably at the high table? Some guy comes and says, I will also sit at this high table. Why you will go? And that guy will not, and everybody looks out for their interest. Today, if we sit at the high table, today we'll say, oh, we'll all sit together. But tomorrow, India will also say, no, others should leave. We will sit. So nobody likes that. That is reason number one. Reason number two is obviously racism. Canadians, they're not happy. Third, they are part of the British Empire, and now we have India, which is formerly of the British. So it's really bothersome. It really gets under their skin. The Canadians, they cannot stand this.
Okay.
And so they are giving space to these horrible Khalistani elements. And I can just say one thing. I can only explain this in Hindi. India ka kuch nahi bigde. Khalistaniyon se, ultimately, yes, they can create trouble for us, but Khalistan is a non-starter. Nothing. Ultimately, they will not be able to do anything to us.
Okay.
You know who they are going to harm? Canada. This is how Pakistan got started, right? Pakistan also thought that I will put snakes on my territory and only India will get hurt. What has happened? After 30 years of this policy, what has happened? We have suffered a lot. Of course, we have suffered. We are just 2611. We are still suffering here. Yes, we will get bleeding. We will suffer. But who has suffered more? Ultimately, it is Pakistan which has become a failed state, right? Yes, we have suffered. So, same thing is going to happen between Canada and India. Yes, Canada is breeding Khalistanis. Yes, they will create trouble. Yes, there will be some problems in India. But ultimately, India will prevail because we are much more powerful. We are much stronger. Ultimately, we will win. But the country which will pay the heaviest price is Canada. Right now, Trudeau is not realizing what a big price Canada is going to pay. He is breeding, these people are snakes. I mean, did you see that procession where, they are recreating the assassination of Hitler? These are hardcore terrorists. I mean, anytime India raises some concern, people make fun, they'll say how it will affect us. India said the same thing about Pakistan. See, the whole Western world used to love and support Pakistan, give them lots of aid. We told them, don't help terrorists. But they did not listen to us. Today, they all know that the world would have been a better place if they had not supported Pakistan. Same thing Canada is doing. Canada said, no, this problem, Khalistanis will never be a problem for us. No, these are terrorists. If you breed terrorists, they will come and bite you. How much terrorism can they send from all the way from Canada to India? They can create some trouble, but some level is there. But the actual problem will be faced in Canada. Canada will pay the real price.
Okay. So, will there be an end to this Khalistani forces, or Khalistani elements, because right now I would add a question as well. See, the Khalistani things which is happening in UK as well as in Canada as well, they got their own praise as well. Now India is dealing them in a different kind of manner as well. So be it NSA, Ajit Doval, or be it Jay Shankar, they are giving their replies in a very befitting manner as well. So what will be the future of these elements, and will they are some kind of an international pressure for us, right? So how can we handle them, or what is the futuristic terms to be handled for this Khalistani forces or elements, sir?
See, what we have to do is first, because the danger with these Khalistanis is that they are a new kind of terrorism, which we are seeing with Islamists as well. That is, the Islamists, they have realized that they can do a lot better by speaking a sort of woke language. We see these Khalistanis. If you see some of the recent dispatches from, some of even the terrorist Islamist terror organizations that operate in Kashmir, if you read their dispatches, you cannot even tell whether this was written by some jihadi terrorist or whether it was written by some professor at some very liberal arts institution. So they have created this very toxic mix of wokeness and terrorism. It's a kind of woke jihadism that they have created, which is exactly the model that the Khalistanis are using. If you see, for instance, the Khalistanis, they are going, and something in Australia, for instance, they went to Australia and they contacted indigenous people's movements in Australia. So the original inhabitants who I just said, they suffered because of the British white settlers, and they are trying to make it appear as if the Khalistanis are just like the indigenous people who have been wiped out by the Indians. It's all lies. But the point is that it's a very powerful kind of line. And other countries who don't know about our the average American or Canadian does not know about India's internal matters. So if you package it in a certain way, people might start sympathizing. This is a very big danger. And for that, India, I would say our big advantage is that we have our diaspora. And I read somewhere that India's diaspora in history is perhaps the most powerful one. And I would really say, Indian diaspora has to start being an advocate for India. The Chinese diaspora, they do so much for China. Every other group, the Muslim diaspora, they work for the Islamic world. And yes, if you are part of the Indian diaspora, it is not unfair to have the expectation that you will contribute towards India's image. And the government has to sort of give some impetus, has to start engaging with the diaspora in a way that it's not just about nostalgia. We need hard-nosed diplomatic goals. So yes, I would say the Indian diaspora has to start lobbying for India. There is nothing, as an Indian, I feel no shame in asking Indians settled abroad to stand up for us, because every other community is doing it. You might say, but somebody might say, but I'm an American now. Yes. But have you seen other groups, other diaspora groups are fighting for their country? And the Indian diaspora, I would say it's both their duty, but of course nobody does anything for free. It's also the job of the government to utilize this potential and make sure that they turn into lobbyists for India. We need them.
Sure. Let's go into this Indian-American relations in detail as well. So you were talking about a scam which has came out as well. So let's talk about first, and we'll go into the takeaways of the recent Prime Minister visit into this US, and then we'll talk about the 2024 US election as well. So tell us about the scam which has happened, sir, because there was a say after the elections that US is very quiet on China, and the US is not attacking the China very openly as well, and there has been a link with the Hunter Biden to the Chinese as well. So explain us, because what has happened after Biden took over, or what is the scam all about, sir?
The problem I would say with America today is that it's so hopelessly corrupt. I mean, why did America lose the war in Afghanistan? Not because America was weak. America is very, very strong. It lost because it is hopelessly corrupt. And the entire defense establishment in the US is corrupt. And I'll explain this scam. So one has to listen carefully to understand the scam. So it's very simple. So what did the Pentagon say? The US Defense Department says we have suddenly found $6 billion extra dollars, $6.3 billion extra dollars that we had to give aid to Ukraine that we did not know we had. So how did this happen? They're saying, because we did wrong accounting. No, they have not done wrong accounting. They are doing a scam, and I'll tell you how the scam is. Suppose I tell you that 10,000 rupees I am giving you, these are obviously numbers for imagination's sake, that I have sanctioned 10,000 rupees to give aid to Ukraine. Okay. And so with 10,000 rupees, how many tanks can you buy? Suppose one tank is only 1,000 rupees. So you can give 10 tanks. Okay. So you think that, okay, so I buy 10 tanks, and if I give them to Ukraine, I have given 10,000 rupees worth, 1,000 rupees per tank, 10 tanks I have bought, 10,000 rupees total aid sanction. Now let me show you how the scam is. Now I will say, suppose I want to send more tanks, I will say, wait, but 1,000 rupees is the price of a new tank. But what I will do is, instead of sending them the new tanks, the tanks which I already had sitting in my country, in my military's reserve, I will send those to Ukraine. But see, those tanks have become maybe 5 years old. And now I can claim, now see the fun is, I can claim depreciation. I will say, wait, the cost of one tank was 1,000 rupees, but that is the new tank price. Because these tanks are old, their price has depreciated from 1,000 rupees to just 100 rupees.
Okay.
Now tell me, how many tanks can you send? Do you see how it is? Do you see how it is?
Got it.
1,000 rupees is the price of one tank.
Yeah, got it.
Because when the aid was sanctioned, the aid did not say how many tanks you have to send. The aid said 10,000 rupees I am giving you to give aid. Now everybody might think, okay, one tank is 1,000 rupees, so you can send 10 tanks.
10 tanks.
But now I will say, wait, but I can claim the price of every tank to be 1 rupee also. I can say, because the tank is old, I can claim it to be 1 rupee, I can claim it to be 50 paisa if I want. So I will say the 1,000 rupees tank, because it was sitting here since last year, the price of it is now just 100 rupees. So now I can send 100 tanks. Okay? But now see the fun. So I have sanctioned, essentially, you had sanctioned 10 tanks. In place, I have sent 100 tanks. But these 100 tanks that I have sent from my own military, I have to replace, na? So then I will go and I will buy 100 new tanks from the defense contractor. So now you see how the scam is working? So what has happened? The defense contractor has bribed the US government, the people who run the government, to lie about this. So who will sell these new 100 tanks?
Okay.
So you see, in the beginning, if he had sanctioned 10 tanks, then the defense contractor could have sold only 10 tanks. But what the defense contractor did, he went and bribed the official and he depreciated the price of the tank. So he sent 100 tanks away, but now 100 tanks are gone from the US military's own yet. So he has to buy 100 tanks. But where will he buy the 100 tanks from? He will buy it from the defense contractor. So the defense contractor's order book has just gone from 10 tanks to 100 tanks. And see, it is all in white. Okay. That is how the Pentagon is claiming, we did not know we had so much money. So you said 10 tanks, previously you would have counted as 10,000 rupees, but now you are counting as only 1,000 rupees. So suddenly you have found 9,000 extra rupees that you did not know that you had. So everybody can see this is cheating. I mean, right? The US taxpayer is being robbed. This is daylight robbery.
Here is a very interesting story that Abhishek Banerjee sir has breaked in our podcast as well. So sir, let's talk about a few things as well, like the India-US relationship, as well as the recent visit of our Prime Minister to US. What are the key takeaways? And like there has been a rousing welcome this time for our Prime Minister as well, and the diaspora has been inside the White House as well, and he has told that before 3 decades I came here as a visitor, now official visit on the White House as well. So what are the key takeaways of the visit of our Prime Minister?
Yeah, it is actually unusual. I mean, Prime Minister visited America before, but not as a state visit. This is the first state visit. But even by the standards of state visits, the Americans really went out of their way to make Modi feel welcome. Okay. Because, they need India too. And this is what they want. They want India to become part of the American system. And honestly, they are making many more concessions than they have even made to their closest allies, including Britain. I mean, the level of technology transfer that they are promising us. They are even saying that, some of the final components of the engines, the production line, might actually be shifted to India. Outside, they have not even done this for America. They have not done this even for Britain. They have not done this even for Canada. They have not done this even for Australia. So they really want India to become part of the American system. Now, obviously, we want all the advantages. We don't want any of the disadvantages. This is where the balance is. Of course, there are tech companies, they want to get into India. Tesla wants to get in. Again, we have our ground conditionalities. We want Tesla to come into India. We love Tesla to come into India, but we want Tesla to make the thing in India. So these are really tense negotiations. But the Americans are going out of their way. They have not gone this far out of the way. And I want everybody to realize this. The Americans are offering us things that they have not even offered Britain. So you can understand how much the Americans are offering us. They are offering us everything. And in return, what do they want? They want India to essentially become part of the American system. They are saying, become our satellite state, we will give you everything. Everything, and everything means everything.
Okay. So will India go to that place?
I don't think, and this is of course, Modi himself, he would never allow India to become a satellite state. And I think this is part of the Indian psyche as well. If you poll 100 Indians, see, this is the thing. Nobody in India hates America, right? America is actually one of the most popular countries in India. It's one of the countries, but there's a difference, right? See, I can say, Dharma, I want to be your friend, but I don't want to become your employee, right? I don't want you to be my boss. And this is something that the Americans are not used to. They have been superpowers for so long that they think that just because I am your friend, they no longer see the difference between a friend and a boss. They are like, okay, and Britain is our friend, but we are also Britain's boss. And Australia is our friend, but we are also Australia's boss. They have lost that distinction. And I would actually say, so many of these so-called liberal establishment, they started saying India is not doing this, India is not doing that. I would say the real test here is for the American defense establishment. Can you accept India as a friend without without being their boss? This is the real challenge. Accept India as a partner. We are not enemies of America. We wish America well. The average Indian has nothing against the average American. But we don't want to be a servant. Can you accept us as an equal partner with equal respect? Can you do that? That is where the real challenge lies for the American establishment. Treat us equally. Make us a friend. Can you make us a friend? That's their challenge.
So time has to tell that what is going to happen in India-US relations as well. One last question in this international relations episode as well. So majority of the leftists are accepting that Modi will return in 2024 as well. So what about the US election? Whether it is going to be Biden versus Trump again, or Trump versus someone from the Democrats as well. So what is the US election going to be in 2024, and will India has its own set of favorism in US after the elections?
So again, this is complicated. I mean, at the moment, it does seem like it's simply going to be Biden versus Trump. I mean, Trump is leading the Republican primaries by such a wide margin. Unless something truly unforeseen happens, it seems very likely it's going to be Trump versus Biden rematch. Now, again, everybody has their own interests. See, like I said in the beginning, like I'm fiercely critical of the US defense establishment, right? But why am I criticizing them? I am criticizing them because they are plundering ordinary Americans. But I'm not an American.
Okay.
So, does it really bother me if they are plundering ordinary Americans? I don't care. What I would say is, you must remember that Trump is an isolationist. Trump wants America to go back into its shell. Is that good for me? I'm not very sure that it's good for me. Because I need an aggressive America, keeping China worried. Like I said, the next 10 years are crucial. I need an aggressive expansionist America. So, I don't really know what he's going to do to the American people. But from this point of view, who is better for India? Maybe Biden is better for India. Because we need an expansionist America. So, this is how diplomacy comes down, right? The bad guy might be of use to you.
Okay.
Right? So, even if that guy is a bad guy, I don't really care. I mean, for instance, we are buying oil from Russia. Is Putin really a good guy? Does anybody really think Putin or Prigozhin, these guys are good people? No, but that is not important to me. What is important to me is whether he's of use to me. Right? So, right now, an expansionist US defense establishment is actually good for us. So, we need America to be expansionist. We don't want America to be isolationist. Because if America goes back home and says that, we'll withdraw our navy and our army from everywhere, let China do whatever it wants, then we'll be in big trouble. So,
let's see, as you say, like we are right now 12 15 months away from the US election as well.
Yeah.
Let's see what is going to happen as well.